The night was cold. The wind pushed against the wooden walls of the small cabin. Inside, the fire burned low, and the human named Daniel sat alone. His life was quiet, far away from towns and people. He liked silence. He liked being forgotten by the world, but on this night, silence did not last. A sound came from outside, soft at first like a broken whimper. Daniel frowned. He thought maybe it was the wind, or maybe an animal caught in the forest. But then he heard it again, a cry, thin and sharp, the sound of a child. Daniel stood quickly. His boots hit the floor as he moved to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. His cabin was far from anyone. No neighbor lived close, no traveler came here. So why was there a child crying outside his home? His heart began to beat faster. He pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in. The moonlight spilled across the snow. And there, at his doorstep, he saw something that made him freeze. A woman, not human, knelt in the snow. Her skin was pale silver, glowing faintly under the moon. Her eyes, large and shining, were filled with pain and fear. In her arms was a small bundle, wrapped in torn cloth. The bundle cried weakly. The woman lifted her face to him. Her lips trembled. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Please, help my baby." Before Daniel could answer, her arms shook. She pressed the child forward into his hands. The weight was small, fragile. The baby was hungry. Daniel could feel it. The little one pressed its tiny face against his chest, searching for warmth. Then the woman collapsed. Her body fell onto the cold snow. Her breath came fast but weak. She had no strength left. Daniel looked at her, at the baby, and back again. He felt confusion, fear, and something else. Something heavy pulling inside his chest. He had lived alone for years. He had chosen not to care for anyone. And now, on his doorstep, stood life and death together. He carried the baby inside, setting the child near the fire. The small creature whimpered, its thin hands reaching for the warmth. Daniel looked back to the door. The woman was still lying outside. He rushed, pulled her in, and laid her on the floor near the fire. She shivered, her clothes wet from snow, her body thin as if she had not eaten in many days. Daniel covered her with his blanket. He tried to speak, but she turned her head weakly away, her eyes still fixed. On her child, Daniel sat still. He watched the two strangers in his cabin. His mind was full of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did she come to him? But above all, he felt something he had not felt in years, a responsibility. The baby cried again, louder this time. Daniel searched his shelf, found an old bottle, and poured in warm milk from his small supply. He held it to the child's mouth. The baby sucked slowly, then faster, drinking like it had not tasted food for days. The sound softened the cabin. The child's cries turned into small sighs. The mother's eyes opened wider. She watched Daniel feed her baby. A tear slid down her cheek. She whispered something in her own tongue, words he did not understand, but he understood the meaning. It was gratitude, mixed with shame. Daniel sat there with the baby in his arms, the fire glowing brighter. He felt the weight of the night pressing on him. Something was not right. The woman had not come here by chance. She had come here running, hiding. Maybe someone was chasing her, maybe danger was close. His cabin, once quiet and safe, now felt like the center of something bigger. He looked at the door again, the dark forest beyond. He thought he saw movement. Between the trees, a shadow too tall, too slow for the wind. His stomach tightened. He pulled the blanket tighter around the woman. He whispered, "You are safe here." Though he did not know if it was true. He had no plan, no weapon ready. He only knew one thing. He could not throw them back into the cold. He could not walk away. The fire cracked. The baby slept against his chest. The woman's breathing steadied, but her face was still marked with fear. Daniel sat awake, his ears sharp. Every sound outside felt louder than before. The night was not finished, and he knew it. Something had begun at his door. something that would not end easily. The cabin was warmer now. The fire had grown, filling the room with light. Daniel sat on the floor, his back against the chair, the baby sleeping in his arms. Across from him, the alien mother lay wrapped in a blanket, her breathing slow but not steady. She opened her eyes once. Her gaze moved to the baby, then to Daniel. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was too weak, too tired. The silver glow of her skin looked dim, like a fading candle. Daniel felt uneasy. He was used to silence, but this silence felt heavy. When the baby stirred, Daniel placed it gently on the blanket beside its mother. The small hands reached for her. The woman's trembling fingers touched the child's cheek. She closed her eyes again, as if holding back tears. Daniel turned his head away. He had never felt so much weight in one room. He stood, moved to the table and pulled out bread and dried meat. He chewed slowly, watching them. The woman had not touched the food he set near her. Her eyes stayed closed, but her body shook with weakness. Daniel sighed. He broke a piece of bread and held it near her. "Eat," he said softly. The woman's eyes opened. She looked at him with fear first, then at the food. Her hands shook as she reached for it. She ate small bites, almost as if ashamed. Daniel studied her face. Her features were not human, yet not monstrous. Her eyes were larger, her skin strange, but there was nothing cruel in her expression. Only fear and exhaustion, he asked quietly. "Why here? Why my door?" She swallowed slowly, then whispered, "Nowhere else." "Safe." Her voice cracked. She looked at the baby again, holding it close. Daniel wanted to ask more, but he held his tongue. Something told him her story was not simple. Something told him danger followed close behind her. Outside, the wind howled. Daniel stood and walked to the window. His eyes scanned the tree line. For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of movement again, a shadow moving where no shadow should. His jaw tightened. He pulled the curtain shut. Behind him, the woman whispered something in her own language to the child. It was soft, like a lullaby. The baby made a small sound, then drifted back to sleep. Daniel sat down again, listening. He did not understand the words, but he felt the pain. Behind them, after a long silence, she spoke again. "You, human?" Daniel nodded. She hesitated, then whispered, "I not belong. Chased. Hungry. No place." She stopped, as if speaking more would break her. Daniel leaned forward. "Chased? By who?" She shook her head quickly, her eyes wide with fear. She pressed the baby against her chest as if protecting it from his question. Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. Whoever hunted her might already be near. The fire snapped loudly, making both of them jump. The baby whimpered but did not wake. Daniel placed more wood on the flames, keeping them alive. He thought of his quiet life, of how he had chosen this cabin to escape the world. Now the world had forced itself in, carrying secrets and danger with it. The woman's breathing slowed. She slipped into sleep, her arms wrapped around her child. Daniel stayed awake, watching the fire, listening to every sound outside. Hours passed, the night felt endless. When the fire grew low, Daniel rose to add more wood. His eyes wandered to the window again. His chest tightened. This time he was sure there were footprints in the snow, leading toward his cabin door. He moved quietly, careful not to wake them. He opened the door a crack and stepped outside. The cold bit his face. The snow glowed faintly under the moon. He crouched low, touching the ground. Yes, footprints. Fresh, deep, too large for the woman, too heavy for her small steps. He looked into the forest. His breath caught. Shadows moved between the trees, slow and deliberate, like hunters stalking prey. Daniel's hand went to the axe by the woodpile. He gripped it tight, his heart pounding. He returned inside and shut the door. He leaned against it, breathing heavy. The woman stirred, opening her eyes. She looked at him, and in that moment, he saw that she already knew. She whispered one word, broken but clear. "They." Daniel clenched his jaw. He understood now. She was not safe. Not yet. Not here. Whoever they were, they had followed her. And now they were outside his home. He sat by the fire, holding the axe across his knees. The cabin no longer felt like his sanctuary. It felt like a trap waiting to be broken open. The baby slept peacefully, unaware. The mother lay weak but awake, her eyes shining with fear. Daniel spoke in a low, steady voice. "You're safe here." He did not know if it was true, but he knew one thing. He would not hand them over. Not the woman. Not the child. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows. On the walls outside, something moved closer. Daniel's grip on the axe tightened. The night was far from over. The cabin walls creaked in the cold night. Daniel sat by the fire, the axe across his knees. His eyes stayed fixed on the door, but his ears were sharper. He could hear the wind outside, the branches shifting, and somewhere far between, the crunch of snow under heavy boots. The alien mother did not sleep. She lay with the baby against her chest. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. She whispered soft words in her own tongue, rocking her child. Her voice was so low that Daniel almost thought it was part of the wind. But then she stopped. Her head turned sharply toward the door. She had heard it too. Movement outside. Daniel leaned forward, whispering, "They're close." She gave a small nod, fear trembling in her breath. The baby stirred, letting out a weak cry. Daniel's heart jumped. He held a finger to his lips. But of course the child could not understand. The woman quickly rocked the baby, whispering louder now, but her words carried desperation instead of calm. Outside, the snow crunched again, closer this time. Daniel rose quietly, moved to the window, and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see. His breath caught in the trees. A faint glow moved. Strange lights, not torches, not fire. Something unnatural. The woman spoke suddenly, her voice breaking in his language. "Hunters." Her lips shook as she formed the word. "They take or kill." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask more, but the fear in her voice told him the answer was already too dark. He moved back to the fire, setting the axe down beside him. His mind raced. He had traps in the forest. Small, snares and wires he had built for animals, but they would not hold armed hunters. He was just one man. Yet when he looked at the woman holding her baby, he knew he could not send them away. The woman reached out suddenly. Her thin hand gripped his wrist, surprising him with the strength in her trembling fingers. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment the fear in her face burned into something else. "Trust?" she whispered. "You protect?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll protect." The words left his mouth before he could think, but once spoken, they felt heavy and real. The woman closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to her child's head. Daniel turned back to the fire. He knew dawn was still hours away. The hunters outside were patient. They would wait, but he also knew they were not just searching. They already knew. They were certain she was here. The night stretched, every sound louder than it should have been. Every gust of wind felt like a footstep, every snap of wood in the fire like a weapon drawn. Daniel's eyes grew tired, but his body stayed tense. His grip never left the axe handle. Then came a sound that made his blood run cold. Voices, low and rough, carried through the wind. They were speaking in a language Daniel did not understand, harsh and sharp, like metal scraping stone. But the woman understood. Her eyes widened, her arms tightened around her baby. She whispered in panic, "They know. They call my name." Daniel stood quickly, moving to the door. He pressed his ear against it. The voices outside grew clearer, slow and certain. Whoever they were not rushing. They were confident, like wolves circling prey that could not escape. He turned back to her. "What do they want?" She shook her head, but then whispered, "Baby. They take baby. Me." She struggled for words. "Property. Slaves." Daniel froze. His stomach turned. The hunters were not just after her. They wanted to own her child. The baby began to cry again, louder this time. Daniel rushed over, kneeling beside her. He whispered sharply, "Quiet, quiet." But the sound filled the cabin. The woman tried to hush the child, tears streaming down her face. Outside, the voices stopped. Silence. Then the crunch of snow again. Closer, slower, deliberate. Daniel's grip tightened on his axe. His heart beat fast, sweat covered his hands. He looked around his cabin. The place he had built for solitude now felt like a cage. There was only one door, 2 windows, no back way out. If they came in, there would be no running. The woman whispered suddenly, "I leave." They stop, maybe. Her eyes were desperate. She started to rise, but Daniel pushed her gently back down. His voice was hard. "No, they won't stop." He looked at the baby, then at her. "If you give up, they'll take the child anyway." Her eyes filled with despair. She shook her head slowly, but she no longer tried to stand. She only clutched her child tighter. Daniel took a deep breath. He stood tall and moved back to the door. He whispered more to himself than to her. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me." The fire flickered behind him, casting his shadow long across the wall. The woman stared at him, her eyes wide. Her lips moved, whispering a prayer in her tongue. The night outside grew still, too still. Then came a heavy sound, like a hand pressing against the cabin door, slow, deliberate, testing. Daniel's jaw tightened. His knuckles turned white on the axe handle. The whispers of danger had grown louder, and now they were at his. The door trembled under the soft push. Daniel stood frozen, axe in his hand. His breath came slow, but his heart raced. The cabin had never felt so small. Every shadow in the room seemed alive. Every crack in the wood felt like an open eye. But after a long moment, the pressure on the door faded. The sound of steps moved. Back into the snow, Daniel waited, his grip on the axe so tight his knuckles burned. Then silence returned. Behind him, the woman whispered, "They wait. They always wait." Her voice was sharp with fear. She rocked her baby quickly, as if movement alone could protect it. Daniel turned, staring at her. He could see how thin she was, how weak. But the fire in her eyes told him she had lived through worse nights than this. Daniel placed the axe down for a moment and crouched near her. "What do they want with you?" he asked softly. The woman hesitated. She pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. Her lips trembled. But finally she whispered, "I was property. Escaped. They hunt me back." Her voice cracked. "They take baby too. Born not free." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had heard many cruel stories in his life, but hearing it now, seeing her broken body and desperate eyes, it was no longer just a story. It was real. And it was sitting on his floor. The baby made a small sound, not a cry, but a laugh. It reached its little hands toward Daniel. The sound startled him. His rough face softened as he looked down. The child smiled weakly, as if it had already forgotten the fear outside. The woman watched closely, her silver eyes glimmering in the firelight. For the first time since she entered his cabin, her lips curved into a faint smile. She whispered, "She like you?" Daniel blinked, confused. He shook his head. "I'm not the type babies like." But the child's tiny hand grabbed his finger, holding tight. Something warm stirred in Daniel's chest, a feeling he thought long buried. He looked at the woman again. She was no longer only a stranger on his floor, she was a mother, holding on to hope with nothing left to give. He sat closer to the fire, the baby still holding his hand. The woman's eyes followed him, watching his every move. Finally, she whispered, "Why help?" The question cut deep. Daniel had asked himself the same thing since the moment he opened his door. He stared into the fire before answering. "Because someone has to." His voice was low, steady. The woman's eyes softened. She lowered her head, whispering in her own tongue, a sound that almost felt like thanks. Outside, the forest creaked. A wolf howled in the distance, but it was not wolves Daniel feared. He stood again, moving to the window, pulling the curtain back slowly. The snow reflected the pale moonlight, and there, they were still there, shadows moving slow between the trees, watching, waiting. Daniel closed the curtain and sat back down, his voice quiet but firm. "They won't leave tonight." The woman nodded, her lips tight. She pulled the baby closer. Her eyes glistened, and she whispered, "I fight. If must." Daniel looked at her trembling arms, at her weak frame, and he shook his head. "You protect your child. I'll handle the rest." Silence settled again, but this time it was different. The fear was still heavy, but there was something else too, a fragile bond beginning to form in the dark. Daniel could feel it in the way she watched him, in the way she no longer flinched when he spoke. Hours passed slowly. The fire dimmed and grew again. The baby slept in peace. Sometimes Daniel heard the hunter's whispers outside, low and sharp, moving around the cabin testing the night. Each time he tightened his grip on the axe, ready. At one point, the woman leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes half closed. She whispered, "What name?" Daniel hesitated. "Daniel." She nodded weakly, then pressed her lips to her baby's head. "I am Lyra." Daniel repeated the name quietly. Lyra. It felt strange on his tongue, but real. The moment lingered, short but heavy. In the darkest hours of the night, names had power. Lyra shifted. She looked at him again, her voice softer than before. "You alone? Why?" Daniel did not answer right away. He looked at the fire, remembering faces he had lost, a family buried years ago. His jaw tightened. He finally whispered, "Because it hurts less that way." Lyra's eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored his. For a moment neither spoke, but both understood. They were two broken souls hiding in the same dark. The baby stirred again, letting out a soft cry. Daniel reached without thinking, gently rocking the child. Lyra watched in silence. Her eyes softened more than before. She whispered, "You strong, but kind." Daniel looked away, embarrassed. He muttered, "Don't tell anyone." The fire cracked, sparks jumping into the chimney. Outside, the wind howled again, but inside the cabin something had shifted. Fear was still there, but trust was beginning to grow. Daniel glanced at the door one last time. He could almost feel the hunters standing out there in the snow, waiting for their chance. But inside, by the fire, he was no longer just a man alone. He was protector, and perhaps, though he would not admit it yet, something close to family. The night dragged on. The fire in the cabin burned low. Daniel sat in his chair, axe resting across his knees. His eyes were heavy, but he did not dare to close them. Outside, the forest was alive with silence, a silence that pressed against the walls like a weight. Lyra sat near the hearth, her baby asleep in her arms. Her silver skin glowed faintly, her eyes half closed but never fully resting. Every few moments she would glance at the door. As if expecting it to burst open, Daniel noticed, and though he tried to stay calm, his grip on the axe tightened each time. Then it came, a sound that froze the air in the cabin. A heavy knock, slow, deliberate, not rushed but powerful. The door shook against its hinges. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. Lyra's arms wrapped tight around the child, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel rose quickly, his boots scraping against the floor. He held the axe firm, his body stiff. Another knock followed, louder, the wood groaning under the force. Whoever stood outside wanted them to hear, wanted them to fear. "Daniel," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "They hear." Daniel gave her a quick glance, his jaw set, his voice low. "Stay back. Hold the child." He stepped closer to the door. His heart pounded. The cabin suddenly felt too small, too fragile. The hunters had finally come out of the shadows, and now they were here. The silence after the second knock was worse than the sound itself. Then came a voice, deep and rough, muffled through the wood but still sharp. It spoke in that strange tongue, words Daniel could not understand, harsh and commanding. Lyra's face turned pale. She whispered quickly, "They say, give us..." Now Daniel's chest tightened, his eyes narrowed. He shouted back through the door, "No." His voice was strong, firm. His answer was simple, but it carried weight. He knew they understood. The silence outside cracked. A low laugh echoed. In the night, cruel and mocking. Then the voice returned, sharper now. Lyra shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. She whispered, "They promise. Mercy if baby given." Her voice broke. "It is lie." Daniel's grip on the axe grew stronger. His whole life he had lived alone, but never had he stood against something like this. He glanced at Lyra and her child, at their fragile forms, by the fire. His jaw clenched. He would not give them away, not even if it meant his death. Another knock slammed against the door, harder than before. The wood cracked slightly at the edge. The baby began to cry, the sound filling the cabin. Lyra tried to hush her child, tears streaming down her face. Her whisper was almost a prayer. "Please, no, no." Daniel's breath grew heavy. He turned to her and said, "They're trying to break us, to scare us." He raised the axe, his arms steady. "But this is my home. They won't take it. They won't take you." Outside, footsteps crunched in, the snow. More than one moving around the cabin, circling. The hunters were not just knocking now. They were testing the walls, the windows, every weak place. Daniel could hear them scratching at the wood, tapping on the glass. Their whispers moved from one side of the cabin to the other, like wolves stalking prey. The fire flickered low, casting long shadows. Daniel moved quickly, placing more wood onto it. The flames rose again, filling the cabin with light. He needed the fire bright. He needed them to see he was not afraid. One of the windows rattled. A dark shape pressed against it. Daniel swung his axe toward the glass, the blade stopping inches away. The shape pulled back, a hiss echoing through the night. Lyra gasped, holding her baby tighter. Her whole body shook. Daniel backed to the center of the cabin. His eyes darted between the door and the windows, his voice low but steady. "They're not leaving. They'll try to break in." He looked at Lyra. "Stay behind me no matter what happens." The baby's cries grew louder, echoing into the night. Daniel knew it was like a beacon calling the hunters closer. He muttered under his breath, "Quiet, little one. Quiet." But the child's voice cut sharp through the darkness. The knocking came again, this time not slow but violent. The door shuddered, dust falling from the hinges. The hunters no longer asked, they demanded. Daniel shouted back, "You'll get nothing from me." His voice thundered stronger than he felt inside. Silence followed for a moment, then the sound of something heavy striking the door again. Not a fist this time. Something harder. A weapon. The wood cracked. A thin line of light splitting through. "The planks!" Lyra screamed softly, covering her baby's face. Daniel raised the axe, standing tall, his eyes fixed on the breaking door. He had no shield, no army, only himself. But as he looked back at the woman and child trembling in the firelight, he felt a strength grow in him. A strength born not from anger, but from something deeper. Protection. The next blow came. Splinters, flying across the floor. Daniel braced his feet, gripping the axe with both hands. The hunters outside laughed again, cruel and certain. They thought the door would fall. They thought the man inside was weak. But Daniel whispered to himself, his voice low like steel, "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." The fire roared, the baby cried, the mother prayed, and the cabin shook under the pounding fists of the night. The cabin door cracked wider, splinters falling to the ice. The floor. Daniel stood tall in front of it, axe raised high. His breath came hard, but his eyes were steady. Behind him, Lyra clutched her baby close, whispering desperate words in her strange tongue. Another slam shook the door. This time the wood gave way, a gap opening wide enough for the cold air to rush in. Through the crack, Daniel saw a face, twisted, armored, not human. Yellow eyes glared at him with hunger and cruelty. The hunter hissed, its sharp teeth flashing in the firelight. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not step back. He shouted, his voice echoing, "Stay out!" and swung the axe hard. The blade slammed into the gap. The creature snarled and pulled away, dark liquid dripping in the snow outside. For a moment, Silence. Then the forest erupted with voices, angry, sharp. The hunters roared. Their shadows moved fast around the cabin. Daniel stepped back, sweat on his brow. "They're coming," he muttered. The door burst open, smashing against the wall. A tall figure stormed inside, armored chest glowing faintly under the fire's light. Its weapon raised, a long, jagged blade. Lyra screamed, shielding her baby. Daniel charged forward. His axe swung wide, crashing against the hunter's arm. The creature howled, stumbling back, but another shadow appeared in the doorway. The cabin filled with chaos. The hunters hissed to each other, their words sharp like knives. Daniel had no idea what they said, but he knew their intent. They wanted the woman and her child, nothing else. The second hunter lunged. Daniel barely raised his axe in time. The blade scraped against the wooden handle, sparks flying. Daniel pushed hard, forcing the creature back. His muscles screamed, but he held his ground. The baby cried louder. Lyra sobbed, rocking her child. She tried to rise to help, but her body was too weak. Her legs shook. She could only press herself against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Daniel roared, swinging again. The axe buried itself deep into the first hunter's chest. The creature shrieked, falling to the floor. Its glowing armor dimmed as it thrashed, then stilled. But the second was faster. It darted around the cabin, knocking over the table. The bread and dried meat scattered across the floor. Daniel turned, but the hunter struck first. Its blade cut across his arm, hot pain burning. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. Blood soaked his sleeve, but his hands tightened around the axe. He swung upward with all his strength, catching the creature under its jaw. The strike sent it crashing against the wall. The cabin shook, dust falling from the rafters. Outside, more footsteps thundered closer. The hunters were not done. More were coming. Daniel's chest heaved. He turned to Lyra. "There's no more waiting," he said, his voice harsh but clear. "If they come, we fight." Lyra's silver eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She placed her baby gently into the basket by the fire, then reached for a broken piece of wood. Her hands trembled, but she held it like a weapon. The doorframe darkened again. 2 more hunters pushed inside, their bodies tall and heavy. Their weapons gleamed in the firelight. Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had fought men before, but these were not men. These were predators bred for capture, bred for pain. One stepped toward Lyra, ignoring Daniel, its hand stretched out, claws wide. The mother screamed and swung her wooden stick. The strike did little, but it was enough to make the creature turn its head. In that instant, Daniel charged. His axe split through the air, striking its back with a crack. The second hunter lunged for him, knocking him against the wall. The axe slipped from his hand, clattering across the floor. Daniel's breath was crushed out of him. The creature's blade lifted high, ready to fall, but Lyra moved, her weak body rushing forward. She swung the burning wood from the fire into the hunter's face. Flames licked its skin. The creature shrieked, stumbling back. Its armor smoked where the fire touched it. Daniel gasped for breath, his vision spinning. He crawled for his axe, grabbed it, and with a roar swung low. The blade tore through the hunter's leg. It fell, screaming. The baby wailed in its basket, the fire roared, and the cabin filled with smoke and blood. Daniel stood again, his body shaking, but his eyes fierce. He planted himself between Lyra and the baby. His voice thundered, "You won't take them." The surviving hunter hissed, dragging itself backward. Its glowing eyes met his. For the first time, Daniel saw something other than cruelty. He saw hesitation, maybe even fear. Outside, more shadows moved. But slowly now. They had seen 2 of their own fall. They had seen the human fight like a beast, his axe heavy with blood, his face marked with firelight. Lyra clung to his arm, her voice weak but steady. "They afraid?" she whispered. Daniel's chest rose and fell, sweat dripping. He stared at the doorway, waiting, daring them to come again. But the night grew quiet. The hunters hissed among themselves. Then their steps faded back into the forest. Their voices sank into the wind. Only silence remained, broken by the crackling fire and the baby's cries. Daniel dropped to his knees, the axe falling beside him, his breath heavy, his arm bleeding, his body felt broken. But he was alive. He looked at Lyra, who held her baby close again. Her face shone with tears and relief. She whispered, her voice trembling, "You fight like no other." Daniel shook his head, his lips tight. "I just fought because I had to." He looked at the baby, then at her. "Because no one should be left to them." The fire glowed brighter, warming their faces. Outside, the snow fell quietly, covering the footprints of the hunters. The danger was not gone, but for this night, they had survived. Together. The cabin was quiet again. The fire burned low, filling the room with soft orange light. The smell of smoke and blood hung in the air. Daniel sat against the wall, his axe still beside him. His arm throbbed with pain where the hunter's blade had cut him, but he was alive. Across from him, Lyra held her baby close, rocking slowly. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her face carried something new. Not only fear, not only sadness, but relief. For the first time since stepping into his home, she looked less like a hunted creature and more like a mother who dared to hope. The baby, though tired and frightened, had fallen back to sleep. Its small breaths filled the silence. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, listening. He had never thought such a sound could feel so powerful, so full of meaning. Outside, the wind moved softer. The hunters were gone, but Daniel knew they had not left forever. He had seen the way they looked at him before retreating. They were not defeated, only cautious. They would return. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but one day. Lyra must have felt the same. Her silver eyes turned to him, her voice weak but steady. "They come back." Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw tightened. "Then we'll be ready." For a long time they sat in silence. The fire cracked. Snow tapped against the window. The baby shifted inside. Lyra brushed its cheek with a gentle hand, then she looked at Daniel again, her lips parting. "Why?" Daniel frowned. "Why what?" Her eyes glistened. "Why risk life? For me? For baby not yours?" Daniel stared into the fire. The flames reflected in his tired eyes. He thought of the years he had lived alone, hiding from memories he never spoke of. He thought of the family he had once loved and lost, a family taken too soon. He finally whispered, "Because once I failed to protect the people I cared about, I won't fail again." Lyra's breath caught. Her hand pressed tighter. Around her child she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Then you save us. You give us life." Daniel shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourselves by coming here. I only opened the door." But even as he spoke, he felt the truth pressing deeper. His choice had changed everything, for him and for them. The night crawled slowly into morning. The first gray light touched the edges of the window. Daniel rose with effort, his muscles aching. He pushed the broken door back into place, nailing wood across it with trembling hands. It would not hold forever, but it was enough for now. When he turned back, he found Lyra watching him, her baby, pressed close, her lips curved into the smallest smile. "You protect home, like protect us." Daniel gave a tired chuckle, shaking his head. "It's not much of a home anymore." He looked at the broken furniture, the blood on the floor, the shattered wood. Yet when his eyes rested on her and the child, he felt something stir inside him. "But maybe it can be," he added quietly. The sun rose higher, spilling pale gold across the snow outside. The world looked clean again, as if the night's horrors had never touched it. But the footprints around the cabin, deep and dark, told the truth. Daniel studied them from the window. He knew they were a warning. This was only the beginning. He turned to Lyra. "You can't stay here forever." His voice was firm but not unkind. "They'll come again, stronger next time. We'll need to move, find somewhere safer." Her eyes flickered with fear, but then she nodded. "We go where you go," she said simply. Daniel blinked, taken aback. He had lived alone for so long that the thought of someone choosing to follow him felt unreal. But when he looked at her, holding her child with such fierce love, he understood. She had nowhere else. He was all they had, and deep down, he realized they were all he had now too. Daniel bent down, picking up the axe, wiping it clean with a cloth. He strapped it to his belt, then looked at her. "Then it's settled," he said. "We'll leave when you're strong enough to walk. Until then, this cabin is our fortress." Lyra's silver eyes glimmered. She leaned her head against the wall, whispering, "Fortress, family." The word lingered in the air, heavy and true. Daniel sat back near the fire, exhaustion pulling at him. The baby made a small sound, then laughed softly in its sleep. Daniel couldn't help but smile. It was the first sound of joy he had heard in years. Outside, the snow fell gently, covering the dark stains, hiding the tracks of the hunters. Inside, the cabin was broken but alive. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt he was not alone. The fire warmed them. The morning grew bright. And though danger still waited in the shadows of the galaxy, in that small cabin, for that one dawn, there was hope. A human, an alien mother, and her child, bound not by blood, but by choice. Together, they had faced the night. Together, they would face whatever came next.